embassy in charge of science and technology. So today I'm very honored to be at the event of GBA event and would like to share the vision of Vietnam on the application, development, and opportunity of blockchain to provide and bring to country. Recognize that the blockchain has a potential to develop the economy, improve the governance, and enhance the quality of life of people. So on October 22 this year, the government of Vietnam issues a national treasury on the application development of blockchain up to 2030. So with the following the goal, so Vietnam will become a country among the leading country in the ASEAN and has an international position in research, development, and application in blockchain. Vietnam to be capable of the mastering applying blockchain in the social and economic sector with the goal to becoming a stable and prosperous digital nation. Vietnam will build 20 prestigious blockchain brand in terms of platform, product, and service in the ASEAN. Vietnam established and maintained the operation of at least three blockchain centers in the major city in Vietnam. So you see in Vietnam, it's a very long country. So we have three regions, North, Middle, and the South. So we try to develop three centers in our country. And we will have a representative in the top 10 blockchain training and research institute. These centers are designed to inspire creative and entrepreneurship, providing blockchain startup with the necessary support for development. In addition, we strengthen blockchain training program as a number of universities nationwide, equip a young generation with the skill and knowledge needed to develop and this emerging sphere. The Vietnam government is also committed to create a favorable environment for blockchain application development and international cooperation. Distinguished guests, the Vietnam government also plans to bring blockchain technology into many sectors so that the ecosystem will be formed through the application of this technology in the field of maybe financing, banking, transportation, healthcare, education, trade, logistics, or maybe the industry, production, energy, tourism, agriculture, public service, and so on. So blockchain will play a very important role in enhancing of transparency, trust, security, and efficiency. We envision blockchain as a fundamental technology element to restoring the way this sector operates, improve the service for the people. We're looking forward to work with international partners to promote this transformation and to implement the strategy of Vietnam. So I highly appreciate the work of GBA. Your effort will help maybe the developing country like Vietnam and collaboration with some partner from the US to develop and to implement our master plan and also treasury to help the country like developing country to can reach and can master of the new technology. In this period cooperation, I'm particularly pleased to see the initiative to establish the GBA ASEAN Pacific groups. So I hope that Vietnam will play a central role of that groups. So this is initiative will play very key role in fostering cross-border partnership and promoting responsible blockchain adoption across the region. By working together, we can ensure that blockchains serve the interests of citizens and economic development. Vietnam is ready to embrace the opportunity of the blockchain to bring, and we look forward to working with the government, business leader, or a company from the international to create secure transparency innovation in the future. Let's connect and collaboration not only for the advanced technology, but also to development better for certain community. Thank you very much, and hope to opportunity to work and to cooperation with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we would now have a panel, and this panel is going to be entitled the Web3 for National and International Governance. The panel will discuss how blockchain and Web3 technologies are transforming governance by boosting transparency, security, and efficiency across public sectors. Panelists will discuss the role of decentralized solution in secure identity verification, election integrity, and regulatory advancements, emphasizing how these technologies can create more trustworthy and resilient government frameworks. They also address the push for government standards and global standards that support safe and effective blockchain adoption, highlighting the potential of Web3 to foster collaborative, accountable governance worldwide. The moderator for this will be Dr. Roman Beck. We will have Dino, of course, from the UN, who will be joining this. Eugene has indicated that he had something to take care of, so he will not be attending this, and Anthony Howell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does that work? There's always a button somewhere. I hope I don't have to keep it pushed down. No, that works. Kind of thank you very much for this fantastic panel and for the interesting kind of panel composition. There's a surprise element here, clearly. So we're moving from state and local to international and national level. I realized today that everyone here is more like a family. You have met each other a couple of times, including the people here on the panel, even though we have an anonymous person here. Yeah, right, so a lot of people
myself, of course.
Yes, of course. A few words about myself. I'm a professor at IT University in Denmark. I'm the head of the European Blockchain Center. We are doing blockchain research since 2013. And maybe the reason why I'm here today is because I was also the ISO convener for the blockchain governance standard. I'm sitting at the European Blockchain Regulatory Sandbox, so the previous panel was also very interesting for me to listen in and what's going on here, so what actually regulators can learn from each other in Europe, cross-border. And last but not least, I'm representing Denmark at EPSI, the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure, the development of a blockchain infrastructure for Europe. And of course, it's all about creating a single digital European market, which bears some similarities and also, I think, some interesting starting points here for the panel as well. We do have fantastic people here on board. We have Dino, Anthony, and Anonymous. And I would like that you say a few more words about yourself, and then we kick off the round. I guess we start with Dino. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Roman and Anonymous, for giving me the priority. So my name is Dino Dell'Accio. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the United Nations Pension Fund based in New York. I've been with the United Nations for the last 25 years. My background and my previous assignment was in IT auditing. In 2017, I became the CIO of the UN Pension Fund, and I relatively immediately became involved with the blockchain in order to address an historical 75-year-old problem that the UN Pension Fund had related to demonstrating that there was no fraud in the proof of life or proof of existence of its 86,000 retirees and beneficiaries residing in 192 countries. So I designed and implemented, with the support and assistance of my colleagues in another UN entity, the United Nations International Computing Center. Together, we deployed in 2021 an application, a digital identity solution for proof of life and proof of existence. It has been in operation now for almost 4 years. And then I immediately joined the GBA because, as a former auditor, one of my second obsession was how can I demonstrate to 193 countries, that represented 193 countries, that indeed the use of emerging technologies, such as blockchain, specifically in the solution that we designed, we included biometrics, facial recognition, we included geolocation, and recently we also included artificial intelligence to prevent and detect potential deepfakes, is done in a secure, ethical, and responsible manner. Hence my involvement since 2021 with the GBA, and also further with an Internet Governance Forum of the United Nations to build standard for assurance. Thank you, Brian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Howell. I'm the overseas representative for the government of Bermuda. Bermuda is one of the growing leaders in the tech and industry space, and so I'm very honored to be here in the United States representing them. I'm the director of our Washington, D.C. office. I sit on multiple different boards back home in Bermuda and out here in the United States, and including different subcommittees that all revolve around blockchain technology. And I'm here to share Bermuda's advantages and how we have forward ourselves within the industry and become a global leader in that space. And yeah, we'll get to the gentleman here.
Thanks for being with us. And again, it's going to be interesting with somebody normally wears several hats. You wear several masks.
Well, the guard downstairs had a hard time finding my name on the list. So I had to help him. And I did it this way, and I said, well, see if you can recognize anybody else in me. And no? Oh, how about this? Yes, you recognize? No? One more time. I can be any one of you. And I represent many millions of people out there who wish to remain anonymous in what they do. And make no mistake, they can contribute a lot. And so I'm here to signify the fact that there are many people out there that are either unable or unwilling to produce their government-issued IDs, and we should still be cognizant, and we should still respect that, and we should still give them an opportunity to contribute. This is why this panel is perfect, because there's a lot of similarities in what international organizations do, what some of the most courageous national governments do, that is very much aligned with, by the way, the media and press position on this matter, and that is the ultimate conquest between universalism and particularism that we're seeing in the world today. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Well, we can have a great debate about anonymous and pseudonymous identities, but I guess that's not what you want. But of course, this is sort of like the elephant in the room, right? Kind of specifically when we talk about kind of global scale kind of identity management systems. We talk about self-sovereign identity. We're talking in Europe about EIDAS, you know, all these things that needs to work and need to be in place in a Web3 environment in order to be functionable. And we can also talk about identifiers, about AI processes, and so on and so forth. But that brings me, of course, first to Dino and the great kind of example you already kind of started to talk about a bit, namely your initiative around kind of proof of life and the identity system you had to implement and to work on first in order to make it happen. And then, of course, we should kind of talk a bit more about the need and maybe even the human right of staying anonymous, or at least pseudonymous, right? And that this is actually, from an ethical value point of view, something that is an underlying driving force of the whole blockchain, distributed ledger kind of movement, if you will. But first, kind of, Dino, kind of the role of identity management and kind of how difficult was it, or which kind of challenges, as you have something in operation, kind of how did it mature over time, and what was the challenge, which kind of challenges have you faced when you implemented that system?
Thank you, Roman. Yeah, indeed, especially in my case, the first challenge was to support, if you will, a group of individuals that by default, because of their demographics, they are not really the most digital savvy individual. At the same time, however, there were people that, as Eugene alluded to, were actually often in a position of vulnerability because, if you will, the situation, the local situation in which they lived. Because, for example, being on the other side of the world in certain country, and given the fact that the UN Pension Fund was using a paper-based form on an annual basis to ask them to sign that piece of paper as a proof that they were still alive, and mailing this piece of paper through 193 postal services. As you can appreciate, this process was often subject to delays or to lost form, but of course also by the questioning of our governing body as they asked us, how could you prove that there is no fraud in a process that was paper-based that was sent around the world? And of course, as someone else already accurately indicated before, proving a negative is impossible. So we try to prove a positive. So in designing the application, I looked first and foremost at what tools, state-of-the-art, such as biometric facial recognition, could allow me to prove that positive, and also using a blockchain, because as a former auditor, for me the biggest concern was proof of evidence. Having an immutable ledger that could be independently audited and it could be distributed and not creating a single point of failure was definitely a priority. So as we started to develop the application, we definitely knew that although challenging, our audience, our client, were receptive to having a tool that would have allowed them not to be concerned anymore as to whether and how the UN Pension Fund in New York did receive that proof. Because through the paper-based form, they knew that we had received it only when they received the payment next month. Because if the UN Pension Fund at the end of the year did not receive that proof, we by regulation were forced to suspend the payment. So either they start calling incessantly the call center and ask, did you receive the form, and finally reach a level of confidence, or just hoping that every month they will receive the payment. So they were receptive to, if you will, engage on the challenge. But of course, with the technology, for example, one of the first things that we realized is that we thought everybody had an adequate device, an adequate smartphone. And instead, pretty soon, we had to realize that that was not the case. So to a relatively good portion of our client, we had to ask them to upgrade their device because we needed to use devices where the biometric profile was going to be saved in the HSM, the hardware security mode of the phone, and not all the phone available out there in the world had that ability. So we went through that process, but one of the most important things, I think it was alluded to before, was the language. How can you communicate the benefit, the potential of this technology to a client that is not prepared on, is not familiar with technical terms? How do you explain the benefit of a blockchain? How do you explain the benefit of the immutable ledger? And so forth and so on. So we definitely understood that there was an issue of communication, an issue of, if you will, training, but also at a certain point, we also realized that we had assumed by default that everybody had a smartphone in the world. And after a few years, after the second year, we actually realized that that was not the case. We do have situations where certain parts of the world, some of our clients do not have the ability to own a smartphone. And being the UN, we could not be okay with a digital divide. So likely, again, with my colleague from UNICC, we came up with a kiosk mode where we installed a kiosk mode using an iPad in the local office of the United Nations, where on a yearly basis they can go and perform the process and be identified. So education, communication, and definitely be aware of the technology, not only in the developed country, but around the world.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dino, for that. And I wanted to say that we, the many millions of anonymous people out there, we really like what the United Nations as an international organization is doing. Now, Red Cross is going to help you if you have an injury anywhere in the world without a reference to your citizenship. High Commission for Refugees is going to try to help you with food or water, no matter where you are. GOSH, DAO platform that's currently being tested by the Internet Governance Forum's Dynamic Coalition on Blockchain Assurances and Standardization, where both GBA and the UN Pension Fund are co-leads, does not ask for your citizenship or does not ask you to prove any government documentation. Now, of course, we are compliant with the IGF rules that they need to look at whoever becomes the member of that coalition and do some kind of pre-screening for them. That's perfectly okay with the DAO. Devote does not distinguish who you are and guarantees your true anonymity when you vote. So this is why some of the most technically advanced blockchain solutions are very much aligned with the practices of international organizations, because they lead to universality, which is called, where all people have human rights and they have equal human rights to get medical care, to get their pension on time and using efficient methods, to have help with food, or to have an ability to govern the society that you live in.
Perfect, excellent. Kind of you save your best ammunition for the end, right? So as a catchphrase, you know, kind of mankind and the best of the world. You know, but the important part here is actually kind of that we are already discussing identity and identity management and who's granting identity as a human right. And that raises all kinds of philosophical and ethical questions, because right now, even in the example we heard earlier, the state of Estonia, you know, you have to produce some ID to get a registry in Estonia, right? And that is clearly something that is issued by some government and is not under your control. So if you're saying kind of something like identity isn't a thing that should be stripped away from you, then of course we're coming to self-sovereign identity, we're coming to frameworks and regulation that actually embrace and allow for these kind of identity systems. Now, clearly, sort of, I'm now curious, kind of, because we are talking also about Bermudas and having a jurisdiction that is progressive and forthcoming and supportive to Web3 models. In the context of identity management and identity solutions, kind of, when can I get my e-residency on the Bermudas?
That was a good question. I'm waiting for mine too. No, it's, you know, this is, and to the point that's been made so far on this panel, I think a very important part is the balance. Because practicality dictates that you have, as a government, to do what is best for the people. And therefore, people also have their own interests. And so you want to make sure that people have protections. People are very cautious about who their information is shared with and who it's given to. And as a government, you want to streamline different services, and you want to make sure that they have access to efficiency and that the cost is manageable. And so in looking at it from that perspective, the government, especially in Bermuda, is very progressive in the fact that we allow industry to have a say. We allow our, whether it be the Quangos or whether it be the other people within the different components and departments, to help frame how this is viewed and how this is looked at. And so we've tried to minimize blockades. We're trying to minimize the government interceding and therefore narrowing the focus, narrowing the scope, making too many limitations that's not beneficial. And so, I mean, this is, I think the great example we can look at is like, you know, the Digital Asset and Business Act that we utilize for how we structured ourselves in the blockchain and technology industry. And we had industry leaders that looked at that and that guided, and it allows us to be flexible to make sure that we can update the legislation as necessary as, you know, technology inevitably continuously develop. Every single probably day to day, I would say more week to week, we see how technology develops and advances in ways that are not thought of. And so we maintain that flexibility. I'll say, for example, with DAOs, it's interesting because I do sit on one of the subcommittees, and one of them is the DAO, and another one is digital identity. And right now, the law firms are the ones that are actually looking and assessing the legal frame and how this can be therefore either implemented into DAPA, or is it going to be created into a new legislation, but maintain that flexibility for it to be accommodating as the needs arise. And I think that's very important as well.
Definitely, it's important. Kind of, I've been 2 weeks ago in London on a RegTech forum. Kind of, I remember that the regulators of Gibraltar kind of were talking about their initiatives and how they were kind of quite progressive in developing regulatory frameworks that allow to register your operations, your organization on Gibraltar, that rock. When we also talk in this panel about standards and regulation, right? So, and for me, the question is it top down, is it bottom up, right? And I remember kind of discussions with companies saying, and we are, specifically banks, we wait that the regulator is telling us what to do. And often when you talk to regulators, they're saying, and we are waiting for the market to come forward with some best practice. And then we take that and make it, frame it in a rule. So when we take this into perspective, Dino, what do you think is sort of like necessary on an international level to drive the growth of Web3, of DLT, name it, right? From a standardization point of view and from a regulation point of view, and what would be sort of like the most imminent, most urgent need in order to safeguard any kind of investment into Web3 to make them future-proof from a standardization and regulation point of view?
So, of course, from my point of view, being in the UN, I can definitely point out to the benefit that the UN offers. So, a month and a half ago, on the 22nd of September, by consensus, the 193 countries of the United Nations approved the Pact for the Future. And an annex to that pact, Annex A, is the Global Digital Compact. And the Global Digital Compact has 5 objectives and 17 principles that really provide those, if you will, those guidelines. Because of course, it's not binding, but the intention is to provide a framework within which any of the legislation or regulation, standardization at the professional level, the industry level, the government level, can take form in a way that at least, although they need, of course, respect and take into account the specificity of each country, they can still share certain principles. And the point is that technology does not have boundaries. Digital technology, digital identity, of course I'm biased in this domain, does not stop at the physical boundary and perimeter of a country. And even more today, when we're talking about Web3, we are talking about a virtual environment where people should be able and will like to be able to operate across the globe in the virtual world. And therefore, I think there is the need, talking about priorities, to start looking at interoperability standards. Start to look at how the various solutions, how the various technology can be, if you will, adopted and adapted in a way that they go beyond the national boundary, but can enable and support people, the virtual citizen, in operating the global world.
See, for me, kind of when we're talking about Web3, we are moving away from the current digital kind of mantra that is kind of automatic and reactive, and we are moving to something that is proactive and autonomous, right? And I think kind of this is more than just kind of having the next level of automatic systems, because now we are talking about agents and their identities, that would be us, and we talk about actors, the machines.
And
right?
oracles.
Well, this would be sort of like we go down to identifiers and identities, and maybe at some point kind of the need or the problems that may occur from anonymous machines, right? So kind of when we are looking into the combination, the amalgamation of AI and blockchain, and we have systems that operate in the background, hopefully in the best interest to the what the originator had on their minds, you know, sort of like kind of there needs to be once in a while a kind of a grounding if something goes wrong, and something goes wrong. Kind of the DAO legislation, the jurisdiction in the Bermudas, you know, sort of like if something goes wrong, what I'm going to do next.
You know, and I think that's
Who to blame?
yeah, and then the blame that's always the key question is who can we shift the blame to? But you know, I think that's one of the mantras and was one of the guiding factors for Bermuda is the fact that we're very cautious, we're very thorough, our regulators are extraordinarily well. You know, with those who end up implementing what needs to be in place, the Bermuda Monetary Authority is one of the, hands down, one of the best in the world, and we're full compliance with most global standards. And so we understand that being a leader in this kind of industry, in this kind of space, there has to be protectionism in place. So again, it balances what's practical with what we would like to achieve the most. And that's why we have a lot of input from different you know, entities from outside of just government itself. And, you know, it placates to that same effect in the same way that, and I'm calling you anonymous or Eugene right now, I don't know which. It's my choice. You know, it's the same message in which he stated is that people want that right in order to protect themselves. And like I said before, government has to adhere to that right as well. And so that's why it's very important to have those metrics in place and those protectionisms in place, but be flexible too.
There's another angle to that, if I may. We talked about universalism and particularism. An example of particularism in this country is that you can go to jail for revealing the name of somebody who participated in an election. That's a federal crime. You go to jail for de-anonymizing somebody's vote, but you can also go to jail for not revealing the name of somebody who just did a financial transaction. Now, again, you go to jail for revealing identity, and you go to jail for not revealing identity. In something that can be called a transaction, an election, your choice is a transaction. So you need to deal, and by you I mean national governments, they need to define, as Bermuda is doing now, where do you stand on that? Do you allow people to have a digital identity? Do you allow for what's called true anonymity? And this is done, again, at the government level, at the legislature level in many countries right now. People are looking as to how to address that. And depending on that, then the next level will be, okay, how do you next protect the legal rights of people who either anonymize or de-anonymize healthcare data or financial data or military data? How do you define that? So DAOs face that legal issue all the time. And one of the attempts to address this in a particular DAO that's now being formed and tested as part of the Internet Governance Forum is to have experts on board with veto power. Let's say you have 5 lawyers in the DAO who are way qualified to answer the question whether a particular proposal is unlawful in any country. And so you can require 5 votes yes of those people in order for any proposals to pass, as an example. So you need to first define where you stand on universalism versus particularism scale. And then depending on that, there will be various tools that will help you adjust and adapt and make like a real life choices for people in the country at the national level much easier.
At that point, I also want to make sure that everyone feels invited to come forward with some questions, kind of whatever mask, Eugene, you're wearing. You look to me like a monk. Maybe we had already kind of enough kind of yeah, ooh, spooky, Halloween. If you have some questions, please let us know, so we will kind of open the discussion about that. You have already questions? Perfect. I'm having a bit of a hard time. I see the lady in the front.
Thank you very much. I'm Heather Flannery. I chair the Healthcare and Life Sciences Working Group here at the GBA. Dino, it was wonderful to hear you discuss the significance of realizing that individual people were absent a critical piece of personal technology in order to become a participant in this new future. The program that you have implemented and others like it form the cornerstone of a new foundation, as we say here in the United States, of the people, for the people. However, there is more to that foundation that is needed than only identity sovereignty. If we wish to lead to data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, personal digital twin sovereignty, an individual person requires a complete data and AI compute stack. They need a new class of total infrastructure, and that would be outside the boundary of any global governance body, any nation, state, or any corporation. So would the panel please comment on how the gap gets filled when it cannot be owned and operated absent a conflict of interest with the person by any government or any corporation? Thank you.
Great question. Kind of, Dino, you were addressed directly.
Sure. Thank you, Eder. Very insightful. So I invite you to read the Pact for the Future, specifically the Global Digital Compact, and also to read what in 2023, the combined effort of UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, and ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, they developed the Digital Sustainable Development Goals. And in this combined framework of initiative, there are already cases, use cases, where they try to see what can be done to support self-sovereign identity, can be done to support that stack that is needed to enable the full fruition of these digital rights. One of those is digital public goods, which basically means that international organization with government can be the promoter, can be the driver of creating that infrastructure that, because of its size, its complexity, requires certain level of initial investment, but that then should be made available to the citizen, to the private sector. So ultimately, the approach here is top-down, but also very much bottom-up. It's not only about having the high-level principle and objective of the Pact for the Future, but also, as we alluded to, with the Internet Governance Forum, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative. UN works with official representatives of member states, but also with the civil society, with academia, non-government organization, technical community. ICANN is there. With private sector, Microsoft, Google, Meta is there. So together, they created a space where that stack can be built and then made available to all parties involved. Thank you for the insightful.
I would very quickly, if I may add to that answer, another thing that I think is needed to happen is actual practice. This is why this dynamic coalition piloting a DAO technology is so important, because they're going to learn firsthand what can be done, how it's done, and then share that experience from top down. I agree with Dino, but also a lot of those solutions are being worked out by common people like me and you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more minutes, and I want to make sure that everyone who has a question has a chance to ask the question.
Hi.
So brief questions.
Brief
or
one.
5 minutes. Oh my goodness, I was 3:50 or so. I was looking at the other clock. 5 minutes. So still kind of questions
Thank
are
you
possible.
so much.
With, I ask you a brief question and brief answers. Kind of. Thank you very much.
Yes, I've been working with DAOs for the last 3 years in communities that are in regenerative ecosystems in poor countries, third world countries. And I know your discussion has been very interesting. I love all the projects you're mentioning. But my question is, you talked about top-bottom and bottom-top. And usually the design of a DAO is when everybody becomes the same. Meaning when you're in a DAO, you're going to have hierarchies within the DAO. Well, this is just from my perspective, of course. So yeah, some DAOs are going to have hierarchies and they're going to have their communities. But how do you are so persistent of like the old models are transitioning into the new models? I'm concerned.
And I think this is a great question for the CEO of a DAO. I was also struggling when I saw it on LinkedIn, a CEO of a DAO.
The quick answer is one word, meritocracy. DAOs are a breeding ground for meritocracy. So people who can distinguish themselves by contributing usually become more active and assume some roles. Now, DAO can define roles, can define veto powers, can define minimum number of votes necessary for a proposal to pass. So it's only limited by your imagination. So depending on the use case that this particular DAO is addressing, you can have a set of mechanisms that will address all those issues. Thank you.
Maybe if I can add, also, we created a DAO within the UN IGF, the Dynamic Coalition, basically a working group, we were able to create with the GBA this working group specifically on blockchain assurance standardization. And I insisted to use the DAO to demonstrate to the rest of the community that we were transparent and accountable in following the structure or roles, responsibility, and expectation of the UNIGF. So not an abstract or predefined model, but the specific model that the UN has created itself to let this entity operate. So I think it has a lot of specificity vis-a-vis the domain in which you are developing and implementing a DAO.
And just a quick addendum to that, it's the same thing, the DAO committee that I sit on, it's the industry leaders that have done that. Government is hands-off, just watching what they've done. They'll make the recommendations, and therefore, as it progresses, we'll figure out how that transitions into other aspects.
Thanks a lot.
Have a question for Eugene, anonymous. So anonymity is ultimately predicated on existence. So about 26% of the world doesn't exist because their country or area of origin doesn't have a birth record process, and 40% of the world's deaths aren't recorded. The United States definitely values anonymity. So my question is, how do you create a larger successful system that allows for anonymity when so much of the world doesn't exist?
The quick answer is I don't know. But I know it's coming for sure. And it's coming through trial and error process. What is happening now is really historical, ladies and gentlemen. And we are going to be on the forefront, hopefully, of newspapers in the world fairly soon when we announce the result of the pilot of the DAO, just as an indication that you should not be afraid. You should go ahead and experiment. And I want to applaud separately some of the members of the previous panel, like Amelia Powers here, is a true pioneer of the use of blockchain in election space, for example, in her state and her county. And we need more people like that. So the way you achieve that goal is by getting more anonymous today people to get engaged. Thank you.
Well, if there are no more further questions, we can wrap up. Thank you very much to the panel.
And those who ask questions can come and get a present from me. I'll make sure you guys get one too, please.
I know, right? Yeah.
Any one of your choice.
I can do it. I'm going to black.
You want black? Sure.
We can masquerade in a moment.
That's right.